If you've never seen a middle-aged woman in yoga pants and a sun hat pull a knife on a man hooked to an oxygen tank, then buckle up because I have. My name's Xavier Whitlow, and up until this madness started, I thought the worst thing about living in the Willow Creeks neighborhood was that the HOA sent out passive-aggressive newsletters about Christmas lights being left up too long. That was before Helena Vanders, president of the HOA and self-proclaimed queen of the cul-de-sac, decided she had a personal vendetta against my sick uncle, Ray. Ray's a retired firefighter with a lung condition. He's on oxygen 24/7 and moves slower than molasses. He's lived here longer than Helena. Hell, longer than the HOA even existed. When I moved in with him to help out a few months ago, I didn't think much of the Welcome to Willow Creeks packet that showed up taped to the door. I figured it was just the usual guidelines about lawn care and trash day. No, it was a warning. Helena ran the HOA like a cartel. You didn't mow your lawn to her standards? You got fined. Parked your car facing the wrong way? Another fine. Had a garden gnome? Immediate violation notice. But she had a special kind of hate for Ray. Maybe because he called her out back when they tried to sneak in a neighborhood surveillance system without a vote. Or maybe because he didn't bow to her authority like everyone else. Things really started spiraling the day she tried to serve Ray with a $750 fine for improper trash bin placement. The bins were exactly where they'd always been, next to the garage, out of sight from the street. Ray had just come back from a doctor's appointment, and I was helping him out of the car when Helena came marching up the driveway with her clipboard, sunglasses, and that damn laminated badge she wore like she was law enforcement. "This is your third violation this month, Mr. Whitlow," she said, tapping her pen on the paper like it made her more intimidating. "We take these things seriously. You'll need to pay by the end of the week or face lien procedures." Ray looked at her like she'd grown a second head. "Lady, I haven't moved those trash bins in 10 years. You're out of your mind." Helena's face twisted. "I suggest you watch your tone. Disrespecting an HOA board member is grounds for." "Grounds for what?" I cut in, stepping between them. "You gonna call the trash police?" She glared at me. "You must be Xavier. Lucky guess. Your presence doesn't exempt your uncle from the rules. And your clipboard doesn't make you a dictator." That's when she got in my face. "You'd be surprised what I can do." I didn't realize then how serious she was. A week later, I caught her standing in Ray's backyard. No knock. No permission. Just standing there, staring at the shed like it personally offended her. When I stormed out to confront her, she had the nerve to say she was inspecting for unapproved structures. "You're trespassing," I told her flat out. "This is HOA-regulated property," she said, cool as ice. "Technically, it falls under my jurisdiction." I showed her the property lines. I showed her the deed. I showed her the no trespassing signs we put up after her last stunt. She didn't care. 2 days later, we got another violation notice, this one for unauthorized signage. Ray tried to laugh it off, but I could see the stress eating at him. He was weaker, coughing more. I started documenting everything. Video, pictures, detailed logs. I even got a cheap security camera off Amazon and mounted it above the front door. That camera would end up being the best decision I ever made. It all came to a head on a Thursday afternoon. Ray was sitting on the porch, oxygen tank by his side, wrapped in a blanket. I was inside making coffee when I heard shouting. "Remove it. Now!" I ran outside to see Helena standing over Ray, pointing at a new ceramic planter he'd put beside the steps. It was a gift from a neighbor, hand-painted, with sunflowers. Real threatening stuff. Ray was calm, but I could see the tightness in his jaw. "It's a flower pot, Helena. It's not HOA approved," she screeched. "I've had enough of your violations. Enough of your attitude." Then she did something I'll never forget. She reached into her purse, pulled out a small folding knife, and snapped it open. "Take down." Ray didn't move. He couldn't. The man's on oxygen, for crying out loud. I was already halfway across the yard when I shouted, "Drop the knife!" Helena turned, startled like she'd forgotten where she was. She backed up a step, then tried to play it off. "Oh, please, it's just a utility knife." I was trimming loose threads from my bag. "On the porch of a dying man?" I said, pulling out my phone. "Smile for the camera." She froze. "Yeah." The camera above the door had caught everything. Her yelling, the knife, Ray looking terrified. I called the cops. She tried to leave, but I blocked her car with my truck. When the officers showed up 15 minutes later, she was still trying to explain how it was all a misunderstanding. Didn't matter. Ray pressed charges. The footage made it to the responding officers' body cams, and by the time they left, Helena was in handcuffs. But I wasn't done. Helena thought she could bully people because she had a title and a clipboard. She thought nobody would check her authority. But she made one mistake too many, and now it was our turn. Ray had been keeping every notice, every fine, every letter she ever sent. And I had video evidence, timestamps, and a legal background that Helena clearly didn't know about. What started as a petty power trip was about to cost her everything. It only took 4 days for the fallout to start unraveling Helena Vanders' entire kingdom. The police report was filed, the knife bagged as evidence. The footage from our porch camera, copied onto 3 separate flash drives and handed directly to the officer who handled the arrest. They didn't ask many questions. Once they saw the video, they just gave that slow, stiff nod people give when something's worse than they expected. Ray didn't want a scene. He didn't like drama. But pressing charges wasn't about revenge. It was about making it stop. The stress Helena caused wasn't just annoying, it was dangerous. His lungs couldn't handle shouting matches or surprise visits from lunatics waving blades around. It was time to take the gloves off. The day after the arrest, I walked into the city courthouse with a folder thicker than a phone book. Inside was every document Ray ever received from the HOA. Every violation, every absurd fine, and every inconsistent policy that had been cooked up under Helena's so-called leadership. I also brought a notarized affidavit from one of our neighbors, Mr. Riley, who'd caught Helena trespassing on his property last spring and decided not to report it at the time. Not anymore. The clerk who took my paperwork squinted at the stack, eyebrows raised. She didn't say a word, just stamped the intake form and handed me a receipt. 2 mornings later, I got a call from the assistant city attorney. She'd reviewed the incident report, seen the footage, and wanted to meet. We sat in a quiet conference room downtown. Her name was Elise Rourke, a sharp, no-nonsense woman with reading glasses and a legal pad already half filled with notes before I even sat down. "Tell me about Helena Vanders," she said, pen poised. "She thinks she's a monarch," I said. "And she's been weaponizing HOA policies to harass residents. Especially my uncle. This got dangerous weeks ago. Now it's criminal." She adjusted her glasses. "We're looking into the HOA's incorporation filings. There are some irregularities." I leaned forward. "Like what?" "Like the fact that their current bylaws were amended without a proper vote. And the original articles of association were never registered with the county clerk's office. Which means, technically, they don't have legal enforcement authority." I blinked. "You're telling me all those fines are unenforceable, and the HOA board members could be liable for damages if they used those fines to intimidate or financially pressure residents?" That's when I told her about the liens. Over the past year, Helena had filed at least 4 property liens against residents who refused to comply with her bogus violations. I showed Elise copies of the documents Ray had collected, meticulously dated and labeled. She gave a low whistle and tapped her pen against the table. "Do you know if she used HOA funds for personal expenses?" I pulled out the last packet. I'd brought a set of neighborhood newsletters and financial statements Helena had circulated last winter. One of them included a line item marked Administrative Discretionary Fund with nearly $2,300 unaccounted for. She used that to pay for a landscaping service that only maintained her yard and the median near her house, I said. Elise sat back and exhaled sharply. This just became a fraud case. Within a week, Helena was facing 3 misdemeanor charges: trespassing, brandishing a weapon, and elder intimidation. But that was just the surface. Elise's office had begun coordinating with a state-level housing authority to audit the HOA's financial activities. Turns out Helena had been funneling neighborhood dues into a private account for over a year. The worst part? She'd named herself the sole signatory on all disbursements. The residents didn't take long to pick sides. At first, the neighborhood was quiet. Nobody wanted to talk. But once word got out that Helena had been arrested, word spread by a few well-placed social media posts from Riley's teenage granddaughter. People started coming forward. Mrs. Lynn from 2 streets over admitted her mailbox had been vandalized the day after she questioned a dues increase. She filed a report. The Jeffersons said their fence was mysteriously deemed non-compliant a week after they declined Helena's offer to help them sell their home. They filed a statement too. By the end of the month, there were 17 formal complaints against Helena. That's when Elise called again. "I don't usually say this," she said, "but you might want to consider pursuing civil action. Your uncle's been harmed more than anyone else. And if you can prove damages, you could take her house." I nearly laughed. "You're serious?" "Legally, yes. If she used her position to harm him financially, and if she violated state HOA statutes in the process, you can file a claim for restitution. If she can't pay, the court can authorize seizure of assets, including her home." Ray wasn't sure at first. He didn't want to be vindictive. He just wanted peace. But after reviewing the medical records, the stress-induced flare-ups, and the out-of-pocket medical costs from the last 2 months directly tied to her harassment, he agreed to let me file the suit. We served Helena while she was still out on bail. She answered the door in silence. Her yard was overgrown, her porch light was out, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked small. The moment she saw the envelope, her mouth opened like she was about to argue. But nothing came out. She just took it and shut the door. The civil hearing came 6 weeks later. She showed up with a lawyer, a guy who looked like he'd been pulled from a real estate seminar at a Marriott. Our side had Elise, 2 neighbors who testified under oath, and a binder of evidence so thick the judge actually sighed when he opened it. Helena tried to argue that the fines were enforced in good faith. But the judge wasn't buying it. Not with the missing funds. Not with the unregistered bylaws. Not with the footage of her pulling a knife on a man tethered to an oxygen tank. In the end, the court ruled in Ray's favor. Between the medical damages, emotional distress, and the unlawful liens, Helena owed over $80,000. She didn't have it. Not even close. The house she'd bragged about endlessly, the one she'd used as the model for the HOA's landscaping guidelines, was put up for judicial sale. No one from our neighborhood bid. But I did. I bought it in Ray's name for just over $55,000. Helena was given 30 days to vacate. She tried to appeal. She tried to delay. But the court wasn't interested. The sheriff's department made sure the move-out happened on schedule. Watching her drive away with a U-Haul and no audience was surreal. No clipboard. No sunglasses. Just a woman who thought power meant she was untouchable, now being pulled out by the very rules she twisted. The neighborhood changed after that. The HOA was dissolved. Elise helped us draft a community charter that prioritized resident voting and transparency. We elected a new volunteer council, 3 members, all longtime residents with zero interest in wielding power over anyone. Ray's health improved. Not overnight, but steadily. And that sunflower planter? Still on the porch. Still unapproved. Still right where it belongs. 2 months after Ray became the legal owner of Helena's former house, the neighborhood felt like a different planet. Front lawns that used to look cloned now had personality: wind chimes, mismatched pots, even a flamingo or 2. People smiled more, lingered longer on their porches, and talked to each other like neighbors instead of co-defendants in a low-level dictatorship. But just as things seemed to finally settle, something unexpected came knocking. A man in a navy suit showed up on our doorstep. He introduced himself as Detective Mason Carr from the county's white-collar crimes division. He had a clean folder in hand and a look that said he wasn't just here to make small talk. I led him into the living room where Ray was half watching a game show with the volume too low to hear anything. Carr didn't waste time. "We've been auditing the former Willow Creek's HOA. Your deposition, Mr. Whitlow, and the court documents from the seizure triggered a deeper investigation." Ray leaned forward, adjusting his nasal tube. "You found something worse than a fake fine?" Carr opened his folder. "We found a lot, actually. Helena Vanders wasn't just mishandling funds. She was running a shell billing operation using the HOA's tax ID. I blinked. "A what?" He laid out a series of photocopied checks and ledger entries. "She created a fake landscaping service, WCS Maintenance Group. It billed the HOA monthly for services that were never performed. The payments went to a P.O. box registered under her nephew's name, but the bank account tied directly to her." Ray's eyes narrowed. "How much money are we talking?" Carr didn't even flinch. "Just over $86,000 over a 3-year period. But that's not the worst of it. There's evidence she inflated insurance claims after those 2 storm damage incidents last year. She filed for repairs that were never done, collected the payout, and deposited the funds into her personal account. I sat back, stunned. That's insurance fraud. Car nodded. And wire fraud. And tax evasion. The IRS is now involved. That house seizure? That's just the beginning. Ray didn't say a word. He just looked at the TV for a second, then back at Carr. So what happens now? She's being indicted on multiple federal charges. She's already retained a defense attorney, but the evidence is strong. State prosecutors will handle the property fraud, the feds will handle the rest. I glanced at the folder again. Are other residents implicated? Carr shook his head. Not yet. But we are looking into 2 former board members. There's a chance they either knew or willfully ignored what she was doing. If they signed off on any of the fake invoices, they could face charges too. I can't say more than that. After he left, Ray and I sat in silence for a while. The air felt heavier, not with dread, just the weight of truth finally surfacing. I thought we'd cut the head off the snake. Turns out Helena was a whole nest of them. The next day, I got a call from Elise. She'd been contacted by the state prosecutor's office. They were assembling a witness pool for the upcoming criminal trial and wanted both of us included. You're not just witnesses, Elise said. You're the ones who exposed it. They're calling this the Whitlow case internally. Ray rolled his eyes when I told him. I don't want anything named after me unless it's a fire truck or a sandwich. We met with the assistant state attorney, a wiry man named Dorian Hill who looked like he hadn't slept since the early 2000s. He was methodical, obsessive, and had a tendency to talk while scribbling sideways across legal pads. She was clever, he muttered while flipping through a binder thick enough to kill a moose. The fake company was registered under a Delaware LLC. Classic move. But she left fingerprints all over the place. Email trails, duplicate invoices, even a birthday dinner charged as board development. Ray raised an eyebrow. What kind of dinner costs $600? Dorian didn't even look up. Steakhouse, private room, 2 bottles of wine. She itemized the tip. The trial was scheduled for late fall. In the meantime, the neighborhood kept changing in subtle ways. One afternoon, I got a knock on the door from Mr. Riley. He handed me a stack of printed flyers. We're starting a neighborhood repair fund. Voluntary donations only. No enforcement, no rules. Just people helping people. Thought you might want to post one. The top of the flyer read, "No more clipboard tyrants, let's fix what matters." I posted it on the community bulletin board at the park, right where Helena used to hang her violation notices. As the trial date approached, subpoenas went out. Former board members were called in, some as witnesses, others as possible co-defendants. One of them, a woman named Carolyn Easton, tried to claim she had no idea what Helena was doing. But a search warrant turned up emails between them discussing how to redirect discretionary funds to avoid scrutiny. They arrested her 2 weeks before the trial. The courtroom was packed on opening day. News vans lined the street, and a local reporter shoved a camera in my face on the way in. I didn't say a word, just kept walking. Helena sat at the defense table in a navy blazer, hair tied back, eyes hollow. She didn't look at me, didn't look at Ray. She just stared straight ahead, like if she didn't acknowledge us, none of this was real. The prosecution's case was airtight. They laid out the fake billing scheme, the forged invoices, and the embezzled funds with surgical precision. When they played audio from a wiretapped call between Helena and the insurance adjuster where she coached him on inflating the damage claim, the courtroom went dead silent. Ray testified on the 3rd day. He kept it brief, straightforward. When asked about the impact of Helena's behavior, he didn't get emotional. She turned our home into a war zone, he said. All because she thought no one would stand up to her. She was wrong. I testified after him. I described the documents, the cameras, the sequence of events that led to her arrest. I ended with a simple line. She didn't just break the rules. She built a system out of them and then used it to hurt people. After closing arguments, the jury deliberated for just under 4 hours. Guilty. On all counts. The judge sentenced Helena to 5 years in state prison and ordered restitution of $132,000 split between the HOA's remaining assets and the individual victims. She was let out in cuffs without a word. No speech, no apology. Just a woman who'd finally run out of lies. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood held a potluck. Someone brought a cake that said "No more dictators" in bright blue frosting. People laughed, played music, and for the first time in years, nobody whispered when talking about the HOA. Ray stood beside me, watching kids run across the lawn of what used to be Helena's house. "You think she'll ever come back?" he asked. I shook my head. "Doesn't matter if she does. She doesn't own anything here anymore. Not the land. Not the rules. Not the people." He nodded, then smiled for the first time in a long while. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, someone set off a few fireworks, small ones, barely more than bright sparks in the fading sky. But they felt earned. A celebration not just of justice but of survival. Not everyone gets to see the villain hauled away. Not everyone gets to rewrite their ending. But we did. The official story ended with Helena behind bars and Ray owning her house. But nothing about what followed was simple. Once word spread that the trial had uncovered deeper fraud, residents from other neighborhoods started reaching out. Some had lived under HOAs with similar patterns: unaudited dues, sudden fines, unexplained maintenance charges. It was like we'd kicked over a rotten log and found a nest of termites. One message stood out. It came from a woman named Vanessa Brenner who lived in a development called Red Maple Estates, 3 counties over. She sent a short letter with a photocopy of a check made out to WCS Maintenance Group, the same fake company Helena had funneled money into. Ray read it twice before saying anything. She was running the scam outside Willow Creeks. I checked the postmark. Looks that way. We passed the letter to Detective Carr. Within a week, he called back with a voice that carried a different kind of urgency. Vanessa's HOA president is Helena's cousin. His name's Marcus Tiller. We believe he used the same fake vendors, the same structure. But here's the kicker: he's filed over a dozen insurance claims in the last 4 years. All suspicious. One of them was for fire damage. Ray's brow furrowed. "There wasn't a fire." "There was," Carr said. "But it was started on purpose." That one sentence shifted everything. We thought we'd seen the worst of it. But Helena hadn't just abused her authority, she'd franchised the abuse. And now arson was on the table. Carr asked us to come in for a statement, not because we were suspects, but because we were considered primary whistleblowers. The state wanted to build a broader case, one that reached beyond Willow Creeks. They were opening an investigation into a potential criminal network operating under the guise of legitimate HOAs. Ray sat with his arms crossed while Carr explained it all in a private meeting room at the district attorney's office. They used the HOA structure to funnel money, intimidate residents, and fabricate claims. We've tied at least 6 fraudulent insurance payouts to Helena's circle. The fire at Red Maple? It was started in a home that had been empty for months. They filed a claim for full contents. Claimed there were vintage antiques inside. They collect anything stolen? Ray asked. Carr nodded. A few weeks ago, a contractor doing renovations on Helena's old house found a false wall in the basement. Inside were some of the items she'd claimed were destroyed in the Red Maple fire. A signed baseball, a silver tea set, and a painting that was supposedly lost in the blaze. She never even moved them. I leaned forward. So she committed insurance fraud by burning someone else's property, then stashed the claimed items in her own home? That's right. And that's why the United States Attorney's Office is stepping in. We're talking about conspiracy, mail fraud, wire fraud, and now premeditated arson. This isn't a neighborhood drama anymore. It's a federal racketeering case. It was surreal. We'd started with a flower pot dispute, and now we were involved in a RICO investigation. A week later, a subpoena arrived. Ray and I were called to testify before a federal grand jury. Not about our neighborhood this time, but about the broader pattern. We weren't alone. 5 other residents from different counties were brought in. All had stories that echoed ours. All had been harassed or manipulated by HOA boards using fake fines and strategic threats. The federal hearings took place in a secure courthouse downtown. The room was sterile, quiet, and cold. When Ray was sworn in, he surprised everyone by pulling a folded list from his jacket pocket. I wrote down the names of the residents Helena targeted, he said. I don't want them forgotten in all this. He read each one clearly. Not just their names, but what they'd been fined for. A mismatched fence panel. A plastic chair. A crack in a driveway. One by one, he gave voice to the people Helena had silenced. When I spoke, I focused on the structure. How the fake vendors operated, how the money moved, how Helena manipulated the idea of order to create chaos she could profit from. I showed the jury the path from the fake landscaping invoices to the real bank accounts, from the insurance claims to the hidden items, from the threats to the lies that followed. The grand jury returned indictments within a month. Helena received additional federal charges: racketeering, conspiracy to commit arson, and insurance fraud. Her cousin Marcus was arrested at his home in Red Maple along with 2 other board members from his HOA. The charges were nearly identical. Ray and I watched the news coverage from the front room of Helena's old house. He'd turned it into a community library, stocked with donated books and a coffee machine no one really knew how to use. The TV played on low volume, the anchor's voice crisp. A growing federal investigation into fraudulent HOA activity has uncovered a network of illegal operations spanning 3 counties. Prosecutors say the ring's activities date back at least 5 years and involve fabricated maintenance companies, forged insurance claims, and harassment of elderly residents. Ray reached for the remote but didn't press mute. "We did something that mattered," he said quietly. I nodded. We weren't the only ones they tried to crush. We just pushed back harder. The fallout from the federal charges changed the way HOAs were viewed statewide. New regulations were passed requiring annual audits of all HOA finances by independent third parties. Residents gained the right to request full financial disclosures without board approval. And most significantly, a state-level oversight committee was created to monitor HOA enforcement activity. It was named the Whitlow Act. Ray didn't like the attention, but he didn't protest it either. He understood the weight of it. It wasn't about fame, it was about making sure no one else went through what he did. Life settled into something normal after that. Real normal. Not the kind where you're waiting for a violation notice to appear on your porch or a clipboard warrior to march down your driveway. The kind where people dropped by just to say hi, not to complain about your hedge height. The new community council ran on transparency and volunteerism. No more fines. No more surveillance systems. Just neighbors helping neighbors. One afternoon, months later, Ray and I took a walk past the old HOA office, now an empty room with a dusty window. A kid had used their finger to write "free at last" in the grime. Ray chuckled. "We should leave it." We did. On the way back, we passed Mrs. Lynn's house. Her garden had exploded with color wildflowers, tomato vines, even a windmill spinner. She waved from her porch. "Xavier, I've got fresh lemonade if you want to take some back. Only if it's HOA approved," I called back. She laughed loud and long. "Too soon." Ray grinned. "Not soon enough." That evening, we sat on the porch, watching the sun melt over the rooftops. The air was calm. No threats. No fines. Just the quiet hum of a neighborhood finally allowed to breathe. Ray sipped his tea and looked out across the yard. "You know, I used to think fighting back wouldn't change anything. That people like Helena always found a way to slither back into power." I leaned back in my chair. "But she didn't." "No," he said. "She didn't. And that matters." The porch light flicked on automatically as the sky darkened. Somewhere down the block, a kid laughed, a dog barked, and the world kept turning. And for the first time in years, that world belonged to the people who actually lived in it.